BackwardsRadio.com. Okay. Monday edition of the After Show. Got Wink and Justice with you. Wink over here on the East Coast.
And Justice over here on the west coast of the contiguous United States of America. It is Metaphor Mondays on the After Show, and this is the day when we call things what they are. No similes allowed as much as we can.
Heck yeah.
At least, hopefully, and at least not for today.
Right.
Another long weekend, Wink. But you know what? We have not been burned to a nuclear crisp.
Right.
So I would say life is good.
Yeah, so far so
doing?
good. Korea's still behaving themselves so far, so that's good. And the Trumpster hasn't blown them up off the face of the mess. So yeah, so far so good, I guess. What do we got here? We got 65 degrees here.
Wow.
First day we've hit 65, I think, since about November last year. So that's a good one, and it's going to go up to. They're saying it's going to go up to 72, 73.
Ooh.
So yeah, so we're very much so in the spring mode. Although that's going to that's a 1 day off. That's a one-off. It's just today. The rest of the week is going to be like in the low 50s, but. We'll take today's low 70s today. Not bad. Remind you to get in the chat. Just go to netrootsradio.com. Scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that. Join us there.
And to the leftish of the chat room link is the donate buttons, contribute buttons. So thank you for your generosity on that. We are still in somewhat of a mini fund drive mode.
Yes.
Though I should confess, what happened on Friday wasn't because of our equipment, but the west coast of the United States got hit particularly hard by heavy winds and storm front. And all of Oregon, 90% of Oregon was out of power at one time, and then the other 10% fell off the grid when they got the other 90% up. It was so funny.
Wow.
But, this is the way life works. But that was actually the proper and traditional definition of an act of God.
Yeah.
Normally here on the Netroots Radio and on the After Show, an act of God is what the internet service provider determines.
Right.
But this was actually from an order of power much greater than even them.
Yeah. Yep.
And whether it had volition or just the chaos of the universe, the power behind it still knocked us off the grid. And so I apologize for that, but I almost feel like I have to apologize for chaos.
Right.
Well, here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently, get this, Wink, 35 degrees.
Wow.
We will be
inverse.
going up to 6. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's still early morning here.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
We're 3 hours ahead of you, or behind you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But we are expected to go up around 60, some rain today, showers this morning, tapering off, and then showers, it looks like, for the rest of the week. So much for getting the pavers onto some 3/4 minus gravel and then sand. I was putting a sand bed.
Right.
Going to float these 12 by 12 pavers down. Actually, they may be 14 by 14. I better remeasure those. They're standard. But regardless, you can't really do that in the rain. It sucks. Mostly because I don't want to move sand that's totally wet. Who does?
Right.
Or let's put it this way. Once you've done it, you never want to do it again.
No doubt about that. Yep.
So it'd be nice to get the shed built, because then I could hang out in it in the rain.
Yeah. Yep. Good place to hang out.
But this is one of these acknowledgments of getting old, is that I can't do it by myself. It really sucks, man.
It does.
Because I used to, even when the instructions say, "Oh, you need 2 people," I go,
"Yeah, right.
You don't know me,
right?
One person." Now, when it says 2 people, I need to get a third.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just in case.
Yep.
I can't do it, and there's another person to help the guy that I got over there.
I know all about that.
So I have 2 people.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very nice.
Yeah, I have
And
to
I
move a
should
refrigerator, and 10 years ago it wouldn't have been a
yeah.
big deal, but these days, yeah, that's going, holy cow. Maybe I can get my brother over here to help out. So
Well, there was a time when, for whatever reason, there wasn't a dolly to be had, a
yeah,
furniture dolly
yep,
or anything, right? An appliance dolly. And so I'd be stuck with tying a couple of towels together and then wrapping it around a refrigerator and then hoisting it up on my body and then carrying it down 2 or 3 flights of stairs by
yep,
myself.
yep,
Then it got to the point where I couldn't do that, but I could do it with a dolly.
right.
Now it's like, can I even get it on the dolly and make it tilt back?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly.
Let alone roll it around somewhere. I'm not that bad.
It is sad.
Oh, I wanted to mention real quick. After show podcast can be had by way of Spreaker as the raw data file edition that comes up fairly quick during the day, and then later on by way of Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean. That is the perfected file that Wink does put both those together. Raw data file, and then the perfected file later on by Podbean, iTunes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let's see. Chinese President Xi met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and their wives had seemingly a fine time. They were sitting once again in, the Situation Room, which is the dining room.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
While Syria was being bombed, and of course, Xi, as soon as he got out of there, said, "This guy is such an idiot. I mean, he flexes his muscles by bombing something. I mean, it's so transparent." And the Chinese are going, "Boy, these people don't have any idea what it's like to have a civilization 4,000 years old like us.
Right.
We really consider all of these like lesser civilizations have only been around. Well, look at America. A little more than a couple hundred years. Give us a break."
For real. Yeah.
And then, so, I guess he said that if Hillary had become president of the United States, we would be the laughingstock of the world. And everything that he said about Hillary, he was saying about himself. And here's another example.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. But like I said, I do revel in the fact that when we wake up in the morning, if we aren't like dead from a nuclear blast, and I'm looking about myself and I'm like, wow, I'm turning around in the corner up there in the ceiling and I'm burned to a nuclear crisp. What the hell?
Yep.
I guess that might mean that we were dead. And every time I wake up and that's not the case, I do feel like an abundance of joy. I'm alive.
Yes.
It's beautiful. There's beautiful flowers blooming all about us. And in fact, there's some beautiful people who walk amongst us too, in spite of, the evil zombies that from another planet.
Right.
You kind of want to know what planet got chipped off out in space and found its way here to make these lizard people rise up. God,
Indeed.
I can't stand it. Okay, these are the issues we will be attending to today. It's getting close to Easter, man.
Yeah.
I like Easter because it has the perfect, for me, the perfect balance of paganism and Christian Catholic appropriation.
Yeah, you can't beat it. It's got everything.
We can't be Catholics unless we've appropriated some sort of pagan ritual, integrated into the Catholic Mass, and then subjugate people into our belief system. It's really cool, especially during Easter. All right, enough of that. Hey, many doctors, Wink, this just came out of a survey here. Many doctors prefer single-payer health care. Why? Because they don't want to be collection agents for the insurance companies anymore. And who would? This gets on my nerves here. One Chicago cop is accused of framing 51 people for murder. Now, of course, I'd like to finish the sentence or the headline, and it would say, if one cop did that, how many more? 51 people framed for murder, Wink. Nice. And this is breaking news here. A Russian cyber operative wanted in connection with the U.S. election sabotage is arrested in Spain. And for now, he's still alive, Wink. For now.
Right.
Seems to be a young guy. You wouldn't expect him to go by way of heart attack, would you? Could happen. Or they're in Spain. I don't know. Some of that coastline's pretty steep. When you're driving around in the car, oops, brakes went out. Accident. He wasn't driving. He was in the back seat of the car. No one else was in the car. How did it happen? We don't know. Accident. Well, for the last half, we report that an Oregon bill requiring fossil fuel projects to undergo a climate test has its first legislative hearing today. And while the Bureau of Land Management pays homage to Big Coal, Big Coal wants Trump to stay in the Paris climate deal so he can sabotage it from the inside. I don't know. Sounds like a RICO investigation to me, but that's just me. I'm a romantic. All that, plus the Connect Unite Act Daily Coast Community Calendar and more. Of course, you know there's always more on the after show with that ever so fine fellow over there on the East Coast with his attendant and very subtle East Coastal elitism, and his name is Wink. And this guy all the way back over here on the West Coast, elitism knows no bounds by me, no geographical limitations. Oh, no. Yep. I'm in your face constantly. Ask any relative of mine, and they'll let you know. Yeah, Mr. Know-It-All. And my name is Justice. And I always tell them, I don't know it all, but I know a lot. And then I mumble, certainly a lot more than you. And we do this 5 days a week for an hour-ish in this particular, specific, and peculiar tear in the fabric of space-time because, well, who loves you, baby? Indeed. My whole family isn't like that, actually, but there are some know-nothings, and they do comprise shall we say, a sizable block of the extended family. And you always wonder, So whenever I hear these things like, we got to make nice with the racists who would never vote Democratic or for a black guy or gal anyway, but somehow we have to make nice with them so that we can try to, make them vote for us. Never happens, never will. And you can look at it in your own family. I mean, generally how I look at it is that you don't want to make fun of them.
Right.
But you kind of want to keep them like more than arm's length. I mean, you kind of want to don't invite him over, stay as far away from him as you can. Don't make fun of him. Yeah. I mean, that's cruel. So I understand that we shouldn't make fun of, stupid people.
There you go.
And we can look at our families as an example of that. I mean, you don't make, I don't know. Sometimes maybe around the dinner table for comic relief, we might mention some sort of, I don't know, shall we say, not salacious, but, some kind of funny story about Cousin Jeb or, whatever. And that's kind of making fun of him, but it's might be just, like a term of endearment, shall we say. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do we need to make nice with stupid people who are racist and bigots who would never vote Democratic anyway? I mean, what's the point?
Know. Yeah, it's hard to say, really. Yeah, I have some family members that are on the Republican side, but we keep it. We don't talk a lot of politics anyway because of the great divide there. But it works. Right. It kind of works.
Let me say a mistake in logic that always follows in this is that when I hear these arguments, we shouldn't make fun of stupid people, stupid rural people. Well, that the mistake is lumping up great swaths of people in a geographical way, or maybe even in a socioeconomic way, because there's certainly enlightened people who comprise great swaths of rural America who are not stupid. I'm talking about just, I don't know. Are they extremists? What are they? The people that have no problem kicking a hippie. In fact, they find great joy in being able to do that, without even thinking, you know.
Heck yeah.
And how many times does one need to be kicked before you realize, well, I'm not even going to punch back. I'm not even going to engage. I mean, what you just said, Wink. There are certain people you never engage with.
Right.
Because it serves no purpose, right? Except, great turmoil.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so you try to keep that at a minimum. And those people in your family that you can engage with, it's not necessarily a bubble of confirmation. I mean, certainly one can have disagreements and still be civil and loving and, have dinner, pancakes, right? But there are others, maybe you just don't want them to start going off. Well, I don't know. The holidays always bring out the most.
Right.
Self-reflection about what it is to be family and American. Okay, many doctors prefer single payer, and you would think that they wouldn't, because all we hear is that doctors just, they want to make as much money as they can, mostly because our doctors pay the highest student debt of any other medical doctors around the world.
Right.
And as I like to say, feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
But I love this. They would prefer not to make more money by tracking down and making people pay up for the insurance companies.
Right.
They'd like to make less money and have more time. Therefore, they'd see more patients, and then they would make more money.
Right. Yep. No question.
Which makes you think, like, doctors, by their nature, are supposed to be scientists. And we expect scientists to have some critical thinking skills, like how the market works. If something's taking up more of my time and I'm supposed to be making more money, what's the trade-off here? Is there really value in that? And we'll see about how this works out by Stephen Rosenfeld out of Alternet. After the House bill defunding Obamacare and Medicaid failed, progressives in Congress and activists have been pushing for what they wanted all along: to open up Medicare enrollment as a step toward a single-payer health system. And the right-wingers are like, wait a second. What the hell? We've been fighting against this, and we were just at the point where we're going to stamp out any bit of public anything, and the healthcare system being the big one. And now they're going to get single payer. I like it. Well, a new poll of 500 physicians by the business networking website LinkedIn found that nearly half, 48%, were in favor of a single-payer system, with 32% opposed and 21% undecided. They're thinking about it. Those numbers were much greater. It's like before, it's like, no, especially among, the specialists. Orthopedic surgeons being number one conservative on the list, That's what Tom Price is, orthopedic surgeon. Though you look at the guy, do you really want him, replacing your knee? I don't think so. The only way he'd replace your knee if he's making a commission, on the knee. You pay me some money, meaning, the supplier. You pay me money to put this knee in this old lady's leg. Then we got a deal.
Right.
What's stunning about LinkedIn's survey was not just the show of support for single payer, but the comments and explanations from physicians about their industry's greed-driven codependent relationship with insurers. As a doctor, it's really against my best interest to support single-payer health care, said Sean Kivelin, I guess, the Associate Director of the International Emergency Medicine Fellowship at Boston's Brigham and Women's Hospital, in LinkedIn's report about the poll by Beth Kutcher. It reduces my earning potential. At the same time, it's about human rights and taking care of people that need help. That is why I do this work. Interesting. Somebody who's bought the libertarian argument. We can't have a single payer because it's going to impact my income. What do you mean it's going to impact your income? At some point, how much does one really need to make? One can offer that argument. But this, and it happens to be a fellow in this situation, actually jumps right past that and goes back to why he became a doctor in the first place. Because when you were a kid, you never think about being a doctor necessarily to make money. You figure out that they do, right?
Right.
But you get into it because you want to help people. Usually, I think maybe how the progression works is that you want to be a nurse to help people,
right?
And then you figure out doctors make money, and you go, "Well, I'm going to be a doctor instead. I get to help people who make money." Yeah.
Heck yeah.
So I think that's how the progression actually works. But they go on in this article and explain that this is a prime component in why doctors are moving more towards single payer, because it's also the time involved in filling out forms to be able to get an insurance company to pay up. And the way that they pay up is by those doctors denying medicine and services to their patients. And then the insurance companies give them a kickback. And these doctors are realizing that's blood money. That serves no purpose except to perpetuate a greed-driven system where the insurance companies are at the top of the food chain. And they're fed up, meaning the doctors are getting, part of this food chain. They don't want to be collection agents anymore. And so they've come to the conclusion in this situation, and these undecideds are now, I think, going to become decideds, because if time is money and there's amount of time filled out to try to petition an insurance company, and you're not going to get the money out of your patient because for any number of reasons, at least not now, and the insurance company is giving you blood money in the process, people start putting value to all that. How much is it valuable to me not to take the blood money? And then those who practiced this found out that their free time meant that they were able to attend to more patients with more personalized care, and they made more money. Gee, it's like the magic of the market, isn't it, Wink?
Heck yeah, market forces.
There you go. Okay, one Chicago cop is accused of framing 51 people for murder. This guy was granted impunity to do it, while all 51 that he framed are still locked up. This is by Sarah Lazari out of Alternet. Horrific acts of Chicago Police Department brutality, from killings to racial profiling to harassment of youth, do not spring from a few bad apples alone. Mounting evidence from city residents, grassroots organizations like We Charge Genocide, and even an outside group like the Department of Justice shows that the problem is system-wide, extending from streets to courts to jail cells, and condoned by the chain of command all the way up to the mayor's office. And who's the mayor this time? I'm looking at you, Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah.
This is the problem, is that this is also driven by a particular form of greed, not just monetarily, but greed of power. And it seems to have corrupted many mayors, not just Chicago, but we'll just use Chicago as an example, because this is not a new problem. We keep hearing about Holman Square, their black site torture interrogation building. This has been around since at least the mid-'60s, if not before. However, focusing on the bad behavior of individual cops and examining how the system responds can be instructive. That's what journalist Melissa Segura does in her deep dive investigation for BuzzFeed News with the story of Chicago detective Ronaldo Guevara, who is accused of framing dozens of people for murder and harming many more. Here's the easy story of Guevara, writes Segura. It's the tale of one allegedly rogue cop accused by at least 51 people of framing them for murders from the 80s through the early 2000s and the rough and tumble Humboldt Park section of Chicago. His alleged misdeeds led 48 men and one woman to be sentenced to a total of more than 2,300 years in prison. 3 were acquitted, 5 received life sentences, 3 were sentenced to death but spared when, in 2003, Governor George Ryan, disturbed by a rash of wrongful convictions, commuted all death sentences to life or less. 2 men died behind bars, including Daniel Pena, an illiterate man who testified Guevara beat him into signing a confession he couldn't read. How nice. Segura notes that the scope of Guevara's alleged misleads tells only one part of the story. Chicago's police brass, its prosecutors, its judges, police oversight commissions, and even federal authorities had ample warnings about Guevara, numerous chances to make amends for the injustices he stands accused of, and to stop him from perpetuating more. Well, they didn't. In fact, according to Segura's reporting, Guevara had the full-throated backing of the police department, which handed him promotions and a cozy retirement. Prosecutors also stood behind him as they built cases around the people he said were eyewitnesses despite unlikely scenarios in their accounts. And this is, I would argue, a failure of the adversarial system, because then it becomes nothing more than just winning. And, if you can put up a patsy and beat them about in the ring and they shouldn't have been in the ring in the first place, it still pads your record, right? 51 KOs and no defeats, the new champion.
Heck yeah.
And you never hear about all the pugs that you beat to crap. You never hear about the contenders that you never faced in the ring. Just the 51 knockouts, no defeats, the champion. But the misdeeds did not stop there. Judges turned a deaf ear to people who swore in open court that Guevara had beaten them and coerced their confessions or testimony. So did high-ranking city, county, and federal officials who, for decades, ignored mounting claims of misconduct, choosing instead to defend the honor of the law enforcement establishment. And what are Sessions and Trump talking about doing? Bringing in tanks to beat up on the poor people, I guess, for exposing the fact that these corrupt practices have been going on and not showing the proper fealty to authority. I don't know. Why else? The Chicago Police Department's reputation for violence has long been known to city residents. In 2014, citizens testified to the United Nations Committee Against Torture that the police department's culture of impunity has led to large-scale human rights violations. Young people of color and communities across Chicago are consistently profiled, targeted, harassed, and subjected to excessive force by the predominantly white Chicago Police Department, the report states, leaving far too many physically injured, killed, and emotionally scarred. I would think you'd be pretty emotionally scarred when you're dead, but that's just me. One cop in one police department. Okay. This next story is by David Ferguson out of Aurora Story. Breaking. A Russian hacker named Peter Levasov was arrested on Friday. So that's so breaking, excuse me. In Spain. He is wanted in the U.S. for questioning in the investigation into Russian hacking of U.S. political parties and alleged meddling in the 2016 election. This is fairly breaking, though he was arrested in Spain. They just released this late last night. Reuters reported late Sunday that a spokesman for the Russian embassy said Levasov was arrested in Barcelona, but would not comment on the nature of the charges, saying the Spanish government has not been forthcoming with the information. No kidding, because when the Russians find out what jail he's at, yeah, I'm just saying. Spanish government officials and police declined to comment on the details of the arrest. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that according to state-owned Russian TV Russia Today, RT, Leshov was arrested on a U.S. warrant in connection to hacking attacks that were part of a purported Russian disinformation campaign intended to swing the 2016 election to Donald Trump. Reuters quoted Peter Carr, a spokesman for the U.S. Justice Department's Criminal Division, who said, "The U.S. case remains under seal, so we have no information to provide at this time. We don't comment on ongoing investigations. Is there an investigation going on? We can't tell you that." But an unidentified Justice Department official told Reuters that the arrest was related to a criminal investigation with no national security connection. Damn it, really? Miami Herald reported in March that the U.S. is rounding up Russian hackers in a worldwide dragnet. In January, Russian cyber operative known as Leshov was also arrested by Spanish police. The U.S. government has formally accused Russian intelligence agencies of mounting a massive online disinformation campaign. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently probing whether campaign officials acting on behalf of Donald Trump coordinated with Russian operatives in their effort to affect the outcome of the election. Now, for those who doubt the veracity of this, it's all just, whatever. I will say that the sheer number of investigations and charges brought about in connection with this last election and the Russians sort of belie the notion that there's no there. So let's be clear. All right, speaking of no there, we better get over there to the Jim Hightower break, and then we'll come back and go through the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Co's community calendar, and then the stories for the last half. You are listening to the After Show on Netroots Radio with Wink and Justice, and we will be right back.
Question: what do you get when you mix a barrel of fables, a sack of mendacity, and a gross of whoppers, topped with a thick layer of subterfuge? Answer: the fiasco called Trump Care. We're going to do something that's great, the Donald Trumpeted, when he endorsed House Speaker Paul Ryan's bill to displace Obamacare. But Trump Care was great only in the sense that it was a great big bloated concoction of lies. Start with the original lie that right-wing Republicans have harped on for nearly a decade. Obamacare is a total failure. We'll, quote, repeal and replace it as soon as we get control of the national government, they shouted. Then, when Trump happened, he made killing Obama's Affordable Care Act his top legislative priority. Ryan chimed in with a perfect imitation of Chicken Little, squawking that the ACA is in a, quote, death spiral. In fact, the president and the speaker were lying. While Obamacare has flaws that require fixing, overall, it's been a tremendous success. It has reduced by almost half the number of Americans who had no health coverage, benefiting especially many white working-class people who had supported Trump. Moreover, the overwhelming majority of the millions who gained ACA coverage are satisfied and glad to have it. Undeterred, the Trumpsters tried another Chicken Little tale. The health law is doomed, they squawk, because it's been unprofitable for the insurance giants, so they're withdrawing. Bogus! In fact, the profits of Aetna, Cigna, Humana, United Health, and other managed care corporations have soared under Obamacare. The biggest one, United Health, has seen the value of its shares skyrocket by a spectacular 480% since the ACA expansion of Medicaid. This is Jim Hightower saying, that's why Trump is so hostile to truth-based news. Actual facts exposed his lies.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back. And thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the cloud, whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Netroots Radio and thus by extension the After Show to span the globe, the solar system, out past the Oort cloud, and beyond. Sure,
Heck yeah.
beyond. Believe me. Yep.
Heck yeah.
Do you really believe that Trump's parents taught him to be such a brash braggart? You know, his mom seemed like a proper German to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I think she would have put the kibosh on that. Maybe
and Fred too.
Maybe
probably.
this is all his rebellion. Everybody, everybody talks about, he was Obama's boy. I don't know. I think he was kind of rebelling against mom's tutelage.
Right.
I don't know. On the other hand, rebelling against mom's tutelage, having the same kind of hair,
Right.
it doesn't really belie such a far-flung rebellion in my book, but that's
Exactly.
just me. Okay, so Oregon bill, this bill actually was uncertain its fate, and it made it to people to the legislative hearing. So it is making its way, and so a climate test. This is in spite of the fact that Scott Pruitt at the EPA and Ziske at Interior, oh gosh, all of a sudden I'm not remembering the fellow, and of course it's a fellow over there at FDA. They just basically want to undo all science, and if it doesn't make money for the fossil fuel industry, then it's not American.
Right.
Apparently. This is an article by Natasha Geeling out of Think Progress. Few states have done more in recent years to catalyze the shift away from fossil fuels than Oregon. In the last year alone, state legislators passed one of the nation's most ambitious renewable transition plans, and the state's largest city, Portland, passed a law banning new fossil fuel infrastructure from being constructed within city limits. Now, I should mention that, of course, it's easy to do because there's this fast-moving tributary called the Columbia River.
Right.
It's a pretty big river, And so hydroelectric power is, since at least the New Deal, has been very big in Oregon. And so the use of fossil fuels really isn't needed. So I just put that out there because in some respects, it looks like it's making a great step forward, but it's not such a hard step, if I am to confess. Okay? And I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying that when we make our argument, this is going to be brought up. Oh yeah, Oregon could do it, but look at all the hydroelectric power they have.
Right.
And I don't know. I suppose I would say that's why we call it God's country.
Exactly.
Okay. Renewable resource right here. Now Oregon is looking to push this transition a step farther by making fossil fuel companies undergo a more extensive environmental review before any project can be approved for construction in the state, informally known as the climate test. House Bill 3343, if passed, would require any proposed fossil fuel projects to undergo a review that would calculate the total emissions of the project and its impact on the climate. Now, this flies in the face of Scott Pruitt saying there is no value to be placed on poison in the air.
Right.
It doesn't, first of all, it doesn't exist, so therefore we can't say it costs this much to be there. When people die of, smog-related respiratory illnesses, according to Scott Pruitt and the guy at the FDA, there's no monetary number to attach to that. How can there be? I mean, basically what they're doing is they're saying we don't measure, therefore, it doesn't exist, which is the first rule of quantum mechanics, I should note, is that things exist because we can measure them.
Right.
So, but their idea is that if we don't measure it, then it doesn't exist. That's not necessarily follows in quantum physics, because they also note that things seem to exist because we can measure them, but it also seems like it exists independently of our knowledge of them existing. Isn't that something? Just saying. The Pacific Northwest has seen several proposals for massive fossil fuel infrastructure projects in the last few years as coal and oil companies look for easy access markets to Asia. As of 2014, a Sightline Institute analysis found that the combined coal, oil, and gas infrastructure projects proposed throughout the Northwest would have carried the carbon equivalent of 5 Keystone XL pipelines. In 2010, there were 6 proposals to build coal export terminals along the West Coast. Today, just one of those proposals remains. Now, we reported on some longshoremen and Teamsters protesting and going on strike, essentially. Well, a work slowdown and stoppage. Drivers not showing up, and then they'd have to, call in some temps to drive the dump trucks in and then dump their dump trucks into the shipping containers and shipping container ships shipping across the shipping lanes to Shuping.
Heck yeah.
And Teamsters and longshoremen kind of put a stop to that. Big protest in Seattle. Another one, the one I was thinking of was the one in Oakland. And then down in San Pedro, down near the LA Harbor. Same. Long Beach. But other projects are still in the works, including our proposed natural gas export terminal in Vancouver, Washington, just across the Columbia River from Portland, that if completed would be the largest oil-by-rail terminal in the U.S. The idea of taking climate change into account when considering a fossil fuel project is not unprecedented, but is rare. In 2016, President Barack Obama instructed the federal government to take climate change into account during the National Environmental Policy Act reviews, but that guidance applied only to projects that required approval from the federal government, like cross-border pipelines. And the Trump administration has already revoked that guidance, meaning federal agencies are no longer required to take climate impacts into account when making decisions, though that directive is likely to be challenged by the court. And it is indeed. Because some of these air quality standards were set even before Nixon was president. They're long-standing, and municipalities count on these numbers so that they can determine, where scarce resources can be allocated.
Right.
Some people actually, like to have a little bit of order to their lives rather than this, I don't know. They're trying to tear it apart, and I think the result is anarchy for a while, at least. And then they'll put their own peculiar stamp of authority on it. Usually the stamp of a spiked, leaded, heeled blue boot. Some state agencies have also done studies on how a particular project might impact the global climate. The Washington Department of Ecology, for example, included climate impacts in its analysis of a proposed coal export terminal in Longview, Washington, concluding that construction of the terminal would be the same as adding 8 million cars to the road. Washington requires similar analysis for all large-scale projects. And then the other side will say, yeah, but all those trees putting out all that carbon dioxide is poisoning us. So, that's the equivalent of like 16 million cars on the road. Neener. They've said that before. Okay. Well, the bill will get its first hearing today before the Oregon House Energy and Environment Committee. So they've actually been in session for a little bit. I don't have the television on at this moment, even on mute, but I'm sure that hearing is in our access channel for government functions. Our little C-SPAN here. Okay, well. Now, I'm not sure. Doesn't New York have some sort of, I mean, like if there's, now, of course, this is by the region, but I remember when the Hudson was getting cleaned up.
Yep.
That there was a similar metric used in determining how much effluent was going into the Hudson and how much that cost, how much it cost to stop having it go in, the savings that might be derived versus the cost that it could be derived. And there was this actuary study just to clean up the Hudson.
Right.
And that was back in the 70s.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
So
yeah, I don't know.
I suppose when you're coming in to deconstruct the administrative state,
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
you make sure you get rid of the things that show that things add up.
Yeah, things
Right.
exactly. And things actually worked. The Hudson came out great. I mean, there's a lot of money spent there, but it was money well spent.
Well, you think of, I mean, that was what those actuary studies were also about, is that the argument was we're spending so much money as if, you're not going to gain any value out of it.
Right.
And I would think that, if lives have value, the lives saved from people not being poisoned by any number of factors of poison in the Hudson River,
Right.
that has value because that's less cost to the whole of the community for ambulance rides and lawsuits derived from bad practices, because there were still lawsuits, right?
Right.
And some of those had to have been borne by the community, and so there's savings there. And then you amortize that over time. So, say
it's
$3
definitely
billion
on the plus side.
amortized over 30 years, and then all the savings derived at some point, you're making money instead of having had spent the money.
That's right.
And
That's
I
right.
guess that's the magic of the market. Though
Yes, yes, indeed.
less magic and less understanding about give and take. All right, this next article is by Dr. Joe Romm out of Think Progress. The good news. The CEO of a major U.S. coal company wrote a letter to Donald Trump on Thursday urging him to stick with the Paris climate deal. Now, the bad news. Cloud Peak Energy Chief Colin Marshall wants Trump to weaken the deal to ensure that, quote, fossil fuel energy remains a driver of global prosperity, end quote. That's code for we've had a monopoly. We're keeping the monopoly. No one's taking the monopoly away from us. Even when we have no more product, we'll be pulverizing rocks for little microscopic pockets of gas in it. Oh, we're already doing that? Told you. I love that. They have to hold on to their industry to the point that they are pulverizing rock for microscopic pockets of gas embedded in the rock. That's where we are. And that is actually what has caused coal to plummet in the market, Wink. Because apparently it's cheaper in this, inefficient, costly fossil fuel industry to pulverize rock for microscopic pockets of gas. And you get enough out of that you can power a society and more.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I think maybe we ought to do something a little bit cheaper that you don't have to go through all that effort.
Exactly.
Because that's not the perpetual machine, right? Where the amount of energy you put in and the amount of stuff you get out, if it costs way more to put it in versus what you're getting out, Of course, I don't know. Maybe they think, yeah, we're going through all this effort to pulverize rock because there's nothing here anymore.
I guess, it's still cheap. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, really, but yeah.
Amateurize that over 30 years and see what happens. Okay, the Paris Agreement, the world's last best hope for preserving a livable climate, is bad news for coal. In December of 2015, over 190 nations unanimously agreed in Paris to reduce carbon pollution with the goal of keeping global warming well below the 3.6 degree Fahrenheit level in order to avoid multiple simultaneous ever worsening catastrophic climate impacts. Did you know that up until just recently, when I say recently, like up until like last year, that in the ocean off Baffin Bay up there, out there where, Newfoundland and Maine, right?
Yeah.
That area.
Yep.
They would have, maybe 7 or 8 icebergs, for the season floating through. Over the weekend, they've counted over 300 in the shipping lanes.
Right.
Oops. So much for your Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
Things are melting, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Look what it did to the Titanic.
Yep. Yeah, that ice doesn't move that fast. You're not going to move that out of the way unless you got
300 icebergs floating around in the shipping channel where, they thought it was a big deal when they had 7 or 8.
Right.
Analysis in the journal Nature earlier that year found, and this is 2015 of the Paris Climate Agreement, by the way, found that to achieve this goal, over 80% of current coal reserves should remain unused from 2010 to 2050. Proponents of coal suggest technology for capturing carbon pollution from coal plants, meaning that they'll make clean coal. We'll have technology for that. Marshall says the technology or something like it is already here. Technology currently exists that can address climate concerns, which, while allowing us to benefit from reliable, abundant natural resources like coal. And he also requested funding for core carbon sequestration research.
Right.
Wow. This is like a fossil fuel industry guy coming to the government saying, "Hey, give us some money." I like it. But so-called clean coal is an expensive and difficult prospect that neither the coal industry nor congressional Republicans have ever been willing to make big investments in. Yeah. See how many of the Republicans that are pushing clean coal are investing in it. And you look at their portfolios and stuff, and it's like totally wind, solar, and people are going, "Hey, wait a second." Yeah, but I'm making, what these guys only give us, like, in some cases, only $2,300 to buy our votes. I've got a family to support. I can't live off of that, a small amount. Even when they're giving sometimes $15,000. I don't know. Look, I gotta think of number one, and looks to me like solar and wind's booming.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Worldwide capacity totally increased and is now much cheaper than coal, for instance. That's another reason why coal.
We got a young kid here. I call him young kid. He's probably 25, 26, 27. That's starting some solar effort here in New York 21. So pretty cool.
In the meantime, Marshall, this is CEO, coal executive, wants Trump to weaken the U.S. pledge to reduce carbon pollution between 26 and 28% by 2025 versus the 2005 levels. That target was the equivalent to 14 to 17% below 1990 levels. The U.S. target is already weak, comparing it to the European Union's target, which is at least 40% domestic greenhouse gas emission reductions between 1990 levels and 2030. So our goals need to be strengthened, not weakened. Staying in Paris to undermine the climate accord would be a profoundly cynical move, especially given Trump's plan to gut the EPA, undo carbon pollution standards for power plants, roll back fuel economy standards for cars, and promote fossil fuels over cheaper, clean energy. You know, they're so evil, they're allowing it so that you can go and shoot hibernating bears. Because apparently there's great sport in that. Just ask the Trump kids.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Man, oh man.
A Bureau of Land Management spokesperson told the AP that there was a change, that the change was part of a new website design. Oh, that's because the Bureau of Land Management website is just one more of a long list of signs that the Trump administration is embracing fossil fuels. Yeah, they have an homage to the coal industry as being, you know, our great American heritage. Okay, that's great. Well, so is whale oil. You know, they have some museums. They got some whale museums that pays homage to this devastation that we wreaked upon the oceans and decimated the herds to the point that there were no whales left. And we had to find something else. And gosh darn it, we were lucky when we found oil in Texas. And Oklahoma, too. And yes, the whale oil industry fought tooth and nail to make sure that this upcoming upstart, these young whippersnappers, didn't get a foothold because they knew what would happen.
Right.
I'll say this about the whale oil industry, though. You know, they weren't like scooping up shrimp and pulverizing them to get like microscopic
Exactly.
bits of oil out of them.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to. Hey, let me just finish up with this last paragraph here. Boosting coal use at home and undermining the Paris climate deal abroad is completely incompatible with the mission of the Paris Accord. In fact, it would ruin America's public lands, indeed all of America, for the next 50 generations. Now we know, you know, from our association with Apache and indigenous peoples' philosophies, is that decisions aren't made on any level, political, marital, etc., unless 5 generations are considered.
Right.
What would the impact of this be on the next 5 generations? And in this situation, it's like, yeah, we'll destroy 50 generations in the future. And it's almost like, well, was that by accident? I don't know. It's I suppose, you know, really where the answer may lie, Wink, is that you have, for instance, as an example, a fracking CEO who is fighting fracking in his county because that's where he lives. And he doesn't want that stuff around him. And he's fighting other people tooth and nail for, you know, essentially invoking their constitutional right to their free and personal use of their own property, unencumbered by others. One of the reasons why we have governments is so neighbors who have disagreements can figure out how to get along. So I always figured if people don't want to live around their product, that says something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's we better get out of here. We apologize for not being able to meet up with Angie last week. We're going to finish up on some other details that we missed on our Wednesday group meetup.
Right.
And then being off air on Friday totally impacted that. But we expect to meet up with her on Wednesday. And then tomorrow we'll have Chris Reeves in his regular slot. And there's some big time news coming out of the region. We'll talk about cross-check and voter suppression and the stats that are being used that are totally, how shall we say, fake.
Right.
or at least not scientifically sound. And I think that's something that's some news that came out over the weekend about that, and I'm sure we'll elucidate more. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio. Once again, we're going to have Hartman coming up, as you know, about 6 minutes after the hour. We'll play Loop Guru, their song Karma Marga in the interim. And stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. And why? Well, because who loves you, baby? Okay, Wink, I will see you on the other side.
All right. We're out.